What if you were to run out of things to say on your podcast? What if you create this amazing project and suddenly you have nothing else to say? Is that possible? Sure, yes, it can happen. But how do you avoid that happening to you? That's exactly what I'm covering in this episode because let's be honest, that's a fear that we all have. We pour so much into this project and then one day it's blank. We have nothing to say. But I've produced podcasts for over 10 years, and in that time, I found a lot of ways to overcome blank page syndrome. If you fear that this may happen to you, it's time to listen to this podcast. Also, hey friend, I'm Anna Xavier. I'm the founder of the Podcast Space, a practical podcast that will get you unstuck. Let's dive in. I think that I can speak for all of us when I say that we've all been in a situation where at one point in our life, we were afraid of being in the wrong place at the wrong time or just being in the right place at the right time and having nothing to say. That can happen on podcasts too. So I've decided to gather my best strategies in order to help you get unstuck if you're stuck or to brush that fear away if it's been hovering over your head and you're just worried and it's time to change things up. This is the last episode of Summer Spark series in which I am giving you different ways to look at your podcast and practical tips that you can implement right away in case you're stuck. So let's start with number 1, the basics. The way to avoid not running out of things to say on your podcast is to actually start with a very solid base. And on episode 7, I actually covered the quickest way to determine if a podcast idea works for you, and I explained why brain dumping is one of the most effective ways to test out topics. If you have no clarity on what your podcast is, it's just going to be really scary and overwhelming because you're constantly thinking about different things to test, you're not sure what your listeners want. That episode covers a lot of stuff that is going to give you a really solid base, even if you already launched your podcast and you're looking to change things up. All right, number 2 is staying curious and not assuming that your audience already knows what you're talking about or that they don't want you to delve into that topic. There's always something else. There's always something different to talk about. And so I want you to keep an open mind. And there's a lot of stuff that I talk about on each episode and that I'm touching on maybe 20% of what I know about that topic. And I'm thinking, okay, I can cover that topic way later down, maybe in 6 months' time, and dive a lot deeper into what that topic is. So I'm not burning out through one idea right away. I am thinking, okay, what do you need to know? How can I incorporate stories from my past of things I've done or maybe about client situations that I had? So I always take the one idea and I try to expand on it and try to talk about things that are kind of like slightly related and just break down that idea into multiple little bits. Not just the, hey, here's how to do it, but also like, hey, I've tried this one thing and I've tried that one thing, and this may work for you if you're this type of person. So there's so many different ways to approach each topic. So not assuming that you only need to see one scenario helps me massively when it's time to create more podcast episodes. Something that I always come across is a podcaster saying that they don't know how to approach a topic. And I'm like, well, maybe you need to go into social media and seeing how other people are approaching the topic, not just to copy. I'm not a fan of copy. You can take inspiration from that person and do your own thing, or because we all have different experiences, listen to what they are doing and think, okay, what didn't they cover that I would do differently? And actually do a podcast episode like that about the things that that person didn't cover. One of my favorite ways to make sure that I never run out of inspiration is that when I am watching movies, walking around, listening to other podcast episodes, I just look at one project and I think, okay, can that topic work in the world of podcasting? So sometimes I'm listening to other shows, and even though they're talking about, I don't know, culture or socioeconomics or behavioral science or marketing, I always approach that topic of how could I do it for podcasting? How can I approach this topic and showcase it to you in a way that only I can do? One of my favorite ways to come up with episode ideas is to just listen to what people are saying. So in case you didn't know, I don't just do consulting with clients. I have a podcast membership, I have a course, and in which we have group calls with students, and I do one-on-one coaching. And so I take every single call as an opportunity for me to come up with solutions to that person's problem. every single time I'm on a call, I always come up with at least 2 ideas for podcast episodes. In fact, this exact episode, Will I Ever Run Out of Podcast Ideas, came from a conversation that I had on Instagram. I, in real life, got asked this question. And so what I thought was, well, if this person is asking me this one thing, I am sure there's more people that are wondering about it too. So let's talk about it. Now, let me preface something here. I don't just pick up topics. I know I've been working in this industry for a few years, and so I've come to know a few things that come time and time again. And so the limiting belief that you will run out of things to say, it's almost rooted in imposter syndrome, and it kind of goes from this assumption that we are not good enough, that we won't be creative enough, or that we won't be able to keep up this creative project, that we will somehow fail. So this kind of falls into the bucket of traits that I know that podcasters, that at least the podcasters that I serve, have. And so I always make sure that I take that one point and always think about like, okay, if they're experiencing this, what else could they be experiencing? So it's just important to understand that one, you don't have to come up with the ideas all by yourself, and that you don't have to create original content. You can look at someone else's and take that and apply it to you. You can always make it like an interactive experience for your listeners, your community, and they will actually like you more for that because you're asking them what they want. So never feel like you don't, quote unquote, have it, figure it out because you're asking. People want to give you ideas. They feel special. In fact, if you are the person who asked me this question and you are listening right now, I am sure that right now you're feeling quite special because you're like, oh my God, we had that conversation. I remember that. It shows that you are listening to your community, and that's amazing. So again, never feel like you have to do things by yourself. You can ask people for help, for suggestions. All right, number 4, stop overcomplicating a podcast idea. Whenever I'm talking to podcasters, people always seem to be thinking that like it has to be a very complicated thing, that always has to be a really complex episode. And again, you don't have to create a podcast that is 55 minutes long when, for instance, it can be broken into 2, when you can look at those 2 episodes and make an additional episode of your thoughts on those 2 episodes, or maybe do a recap. There are so many ways to look at it. By the way, if you haven't listened to episode 31 of the Summer Spark series, why obsessing over creating a uniquely perfect podcast is limiting your growth, because I'm covering a lot more than just these topics. And I think that if you are enjoying this episode, you probably will enjoy episode 32 as well. So make sure that you check the show notes for that. All right, and the last one, if you feel like your inspiration is on the gutter, maybe you need to take a break on your podcast for a month or 2. Sometimes we are not in a creative space. Sometimes we just feel like nothing that we do just gives us the creativity that we need. As just like nature goes with seasons, sometimes we also need to chill. In fact, the Summer Spark series came up because I felt like I needed to create all of these episodes in a different format than the majority of the episodes that I create. So I switched things up and my creativity just clicked. Sometimes you need to take a break, sometimes you need to change the process, or you can get another person involved. Sometimes a co-host is all you need to spice things up and help you stay consistent on your content schedule. Alternatively, you can book time with me. I love brainstorming with podcasters to help them find a better way to podcast, to find a better creative process, and to identify ideas for what's called super episodes, which are episodes that outperform most episodes and that become listeners' favorite. Or honestly, talking with another human about these thoughts that you're having, sometimes just voicing them into the world is enough for you to realize that that is ridiculous and it's a limiting belief and you have great ideas, right? So if you need help, you can always book time with me on a podcast power hour. All the links to the resources that I mentioned in this episode and book a consulting time will be in the show notes. Also on thepodcastspace.com, you can find anything from podcast resources to articles, to self-paced courses and memberships just to help you get unstuck on your journey, whatever your budget is. Okay, I've been Anna Xavier, and I cannot wait to hear your ahas. If you are on Instagram, you can tag me. I'm at The Podcast Space. My DMs are open to everyone, so feel free to let me know how this podcast episode helped you. I'll see you on the next episode, and keep creating content that is imperfect but moves you forward.